Can you please state your name, your hometown, and when you attended Vanderbilt?
Yes, my name is Sharon Shields. My hometown is Paducah, Kentucky, and I attended Vanderbilt as a graduate student from 1974 to 1976, and then I have been a faculty member since then.
Okay. And can you tell me about your journey to Vanderbilt? What led for you to make the decision to attend school here as a graduate student?
I had already received my bachelor's and master's degree from the University of Louisville. I was teaching, and it was really kind of a fluke that I came to Peabody College at that time because this was pre-merger. And I had had a faculty member in one of my schools that I taught in introduce herself and say she was a graduate of Peabody College, the best teacher training institution in the country. And I was visiting Nashville and wanted to see that Peabody College. And so I came over to see the campus. I was staying at Holiday Inn Vanderbilt and met Dr. Leon Garrett, who was chair of the Health and Physical Education Department at that time, and I was a health and physical education teacher. And 3 hours later, I walked out with an offer of a graduate assistantship to come and do my doctorate. And it took me a while to make the decision. I had 2 months to let him know, but I knew when I walked out I would be coming. It was just the journey of making the decision and leaving my students in my schools. So that's how I came. I saw it as a really wonderful opportunity.
Okay. And how would you compare the environment on Vanderbilt's campus to the environment of your undergraduate experience or even your hometown?
Well, it was a little mixed. When I came here, I was still at Peabody College. I felt like it was probably a more embracing climate for women. The majority of the students there were women. However, the majority of my faculty were men. And I will say that there were issues that I faced as a doctoral student as a woman. I saw discrepancies in the opportunities that I received. I saw discrepancy in the support that I was given, not by my department chair, but my committee and my major advisor. And actually, at the end of my doctoral studies, I did not file a grievance, but things were rectified about my dissertation and my progress on it and the way that I had been treated. And that was because of the advocacy of my department chair, who was male. But I saw male students getting much more support and help from advisors, being given more opportunities, and women were really treated differently, even in a climate that I felt embraced women and had the majority women students. And so it wasn't until 1979 when we merged with Vanderbilt, that's a year after the Women's Center was started at Vanderbilt. But we had a lot of reciprocity of relationship between Peabody College as an independent college and Vanderbilt University. And so I was so excited when the Women's Center was brought to being. And I utilized those resources as a faculty member, even though I was at Peabody College. I went to some of the seminars, I went to, the meet and greets, and just felt embraced, and really being able to talk now as a faculty member about some of the practices and things that I saw.
All right. Did this different experience on how faculty treated male versus female students, did you see that deterring any female students or their ability to graduate or pursue their degrees?
Yes. I think that there was not the same encouragement. There was still an atmosphere of women and their careers. I mean, this is the 1970s, and trying to balance academic work and career work. And I think there was that intersection of thinking that, well, women don't need these careers as much as men. Mm-hmm. There's going to be family issues, there's going to be pregnancies, there's going to be all of these things. And so I think women were seen a little bit as second-class citizens in the academy and not having the same priorities many times academically as men, and that was false. And so I did see some of my peers really treated unjustly, even more so than myself. And fortunately, I was a person of pretty strong fortitude, a little outspoken, did not mean to be treated unjustly, and would talk about that, even though it might have cost me a lot of things. But in the end, I think that finding my voice, finding support among other women faculty and students, helped me to survive what could have been a huge delay in my completion of my degree, and probably could have prevented me from becoming a faculty member here.
So I know because it was Peabody, you did say it was more women than men, but did you see any other, how would you describe the diversity in terms of racial and socioeconomic that you saw while you attended school here?
It was a very unique place, and when you ask me how this was different from my hometown or my undergraduate experience, I think that Peabody College opened diversity to me because we had a lot of initiatives globally. We had a lot of international students at Peabody at the time. I actually got to teach a group from Brazil that we were in a training program, and it was a master's program. And when they came, they only spoke Portuguese. They went through intensive English training in the summer, and then they were in my classes. And I had students from Iran and Iraq and Brazil and Saudi Arabia. And so the international student population on the Peabody campus was really great. We also had a relationship with Vanderbilt and those students who wanted to major in exercise physiology or health or physical education that were on the athletic teams were in my program at the college. We had this joint relationship, and so they could come because many of the athletes were very interested in human performance issues. And of course, Perry Wallace had come here in the 60s. It had opened up much more diversity, and so minority student participation in the degree program I was in, or teaching in, I felt like that I had a lot of diversity and a lot of socioeconomic diversity. It was a college of education. There were ways that people were coming here that were teaching from disparate backgrounds and disadvantaged systems, and many of them had lived in those communities. So I felt the diversity among our students really taught me a great number of lessons, and that I was able to experience that both in my graduate work and my teaching at Peabody prior to the merger.
And in terms of visibility, did you see any LGBT visibility while you were a student here, and as a faculty, how has that changed?
It was very hidden here, extremely hidden. It was not talked about, and actually there were, I can't quote the memos, but there was more of an intolerance than a tolerance. And so people were very closeted and hidden in the community, and felt like that it would really work against them and be seen as a deficit if they were out. I think we have come a long way in the next 40 years of embracing the LGBTQI community. I know that even in my work now in my office, we have a student organization called QED that is really supporting that community. We have the Casey Potter Center. And so the climate and culture has changed. But I will say that even in the past couple of years, we've had discriminatory practices and students who have, and faculty, who have spoken against that community and actually decided to leave the campus as a student organization because they would not embrace the LGBTQI community or let them have leadership in their organizations. And so all of these things that we're talking about, there's still a need for a women's center. There's still a need for being vigilant. There's still a need for advocacy. We have not won the war.
Right, right. But what in particular signified to you that changes were being made in terms of whether that be LGBT visibility or the status of women on campus during your time here?
Probably the creation of the Women's Center was pivotal. But I will say that one of the most transformative experiences for me was to be a part of WEAVE, Women's Equity at Vanderbilt. And when the Elizabeth Langland case was happening here on the campus, I actually held a cottage meeting with Barbara Walston from Peabody, Dr. Barbara Walston, and this was after our merger, but we had cottage meetings. We were really working to support her. And for me to see the kind of vote that happened, 15 people voted for her to have tenure, 5 people voted against. These were also the people who, as you probably know in the history, the 5 that voted against had actually left the Episcopal Church because women were going to be more relevant in their personal spiritual life and journey. And so there was huge bias. And for me to see the support from both men and women on this campus and to have WEAVE as part of our culture and climate and speaking out and giving voice. Susan Wiltshire was certainly a huge leader in that, and she became a mentor and a role model to me for injustice everywhere. But having that experience and learning from women mentors on this campus how to advocate, how to be positive in that advocacy, how to work hard, how to organize. I had done some other work like that, but when that happened, I knew that there were people that had our back for gender equity on this campus.
So tell me a little bit more about WEAVE. Did that start while you were attending here or before, prior to?
No, it was after I attended.
Okay.
And I was a faculty member. It was a group that just really advocated for equity among women here at Vanderbilt. The history is rich about their impact and effect. We had, and WEAVE even was about weaving justice into our culture. It was a very effective organization. And I just remember Susan Wiltshire saying, you can go into the women's restroom and cry, but then you put back on your game face as soon as you walk out. And you have to keep that game face. We have to be professional. We have to, really give our best image, but be firm and be determined. There are pictures of some of the women dressing as suffragettes because it was perceived that we were radical, that we were stiff-laced, and that and so we just said, okay, that's who we are. Yes, we represent our foremothers, and we are still carrying out this cause.
Did you see any pushback when this organization started?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
There was lots of pushback. And, we were these radical women on campus and, just stirring up trouble and all of that. But, I mean, it's the same pushback that women get now. I mean, look at our news now. And women's voices have been silenced so much. And this was giving voice for not only Elizabeth Langland, but for all women on this campus and in our community. It was what we needed to do.
Very cool, very cool. So as a faculty and while you were a student here, what did you see in terms of other organizations on campus and that climate, especially sorority and fraternity life?
Boy, that's a double-edged sword. That's a tough question because I still see it. But it's probably improved some. But I think women were very pigeonholed, and there were traditions and what it means to be a woman and feminine and how these things played out in traditional gender roles. And so I was not, of course, I was a graduate student.
Right.
I was not a member of a fraternity or a sorority, but I saw the culture that it created. I saw men sitting out rating women in front of their fraternity houses when new women came onto campus. I saw abuse. I saw traditional roles being played out with male dominance. I saw women feeling that they had to fulfill a certain image. And I still see that. I still see a lot of gender role identity at play between fraternities and sororities and just men and women on our campus and what's expected of women. I was a faculty head of house, and so I saw it firsthand. And I think that when you think about organizations on our campus, the Green Dot program, issues around sexual assault that had pretty much been under the carpet for a long time are now coming more to light. We are being more responsible in those ways. We still have a long way to go. Women still don't feel safe. And so I think that we have done things to try to move this along and give much more equity. But our society doesn't give equity, and it still filtrates down. We're not going to change all of our climate and culture in a university because we are a reflection of our larger society. And so we still have not arrived on equity for women in the larger society, and there are things at play. Remember, students come to us after 18 years of living, and they have already been in cultures that may have impacted who they feel they are and what their expectations are. So college can be a place that helps to give forward thinking, to help students really reevaluate their lives and who they are and their identity. It's a lifetime and a developmental time for our students. So I think that we are trying to be more embracing. But like I said, we still need all of these organizations and all of this support. We have won a few battles. We have not won the war.
So you discussed a little bit about how there were specified gender roles that a lot of people played into, and in class we kind of discussed this role of the typical Vanderbilt co-ed or the typical Vanderbilt girl. So I was wondering, while you attended here and then as a faculty, did you see this? Was there a typical Vanderbilt student that you could describe, and how has that changed a little bit?
Let me just say that I grew up in an era that, even though I was in the profession of health and physical education, for me to walk across campus, I had to put on a skirt. I couldn't wear the apparel of my trade, whether it was a warm-up suit or shorts and a shirt and a whistle. I mean, I couldn't wear that visibly on campus. It was prohibited. We did start being able to wear slacks, but for many things we had to dress in a professional, feminine way. And when I came on the faculty, there was a welcome reception, and I will tell you what I wore. I remember it vividly. I wore a powder blue suit with a skirt, small heels, and white gloves. And this is 1976. Wow. I was expected to show up in formal attire that would be really indicative that I was professionally dressed. And the interesting thing is that the women faculty were put with wives of faculty for this type of thing. It wasn't separated. And so we weren't really seen, I don't think, as full-fledged faculty. They wanted us to be part of a women's organization that was more social and not as professional. And that's when, we started having this joint wives of male faculty and women faculty all in the same room and doing more social things in a garden club. And I didn't last very long in that. I didn't attend very much. Even though it was welcoming, it was it was discriminatory.
Right.
And it was not recognizing my accomplishments and my professional role as a woman or as a faculty member. And so I found myself in some of those spaces that were just a little disconcerting, maybe a lot disconcerting.
Right. Did you hold any leadership positions while you were a graduate student at Vanderbilt? And if so, what were they?
There were no student organizations for graduate students at the time. But my leadership roles came in being an assistant editor of a professional journal for the state. I took on professional roles in professional organizations. And so being a doctoral student here, that's where my energy went. And even though there was not any student organization that I could really be a part of, I told you that I did begin to connect as a faculty member with the Women's Center. That was 2 years after I was on the faculty at Peabody. And I served on committees as a student, academic committees and things that they had a student role for, which I really appreciated. I was on a curriculum committee and giving input, and I was on an admissions committee. But there was no room for me to be kind of the leader of that.
In terms of these various roles, what kind of attitudes did you see other students or faculty or administration have to you being in those positions?
I felt fairly embraced, and I felt my voice appropriately for the role I was in, and the experience I had was legitimized for the most part. There were times that I felt a little oppressed or that I didn't have voice at the table, but it was rare, and especially at Peabody. They really had a way of inclusiveness of students in academic roles and faculty and committee roles and departments.
So you did describe a little bit about the women's movement on campus and your description. Did you see that there was a widespread active feminist active feminist movement or push from other women to join and be active in the women's movement, or was it just a select group?
That's kind of a hard question, because if you think of the university, there were pockets and there were issues that would come up that would motivate activism. I will say that probably one of my lifelong career goals has been to look at the role of practice faculty and tenured faculty on the campus. And so if you look today, we find more males in tenured roles on the faculty. Mm-hmm. We find that they achieve promotion more readily. There are more full professors male on this campus than there are full professors female. And one of the things that happened after the merger is that my department got eliminated. It was seen as a duplication of another department here at Vanderbilt. And so all of the faculty, except for me, were let go. And the only reason why I was not let go is that I sort of reinvented myself and got a joint appointment in the medical center and helped to found the Kim Diani Center that is here on campus still. And so I found that I had to really reinvent myself. Mm-hmm. I had been on tenure track as a tenure track hire. I was set to get tenure 3 years after the merger, but because my department was eliminated, that was no longer a possibility. And so the president of Peabody College, and he then became the dean of the school because we became part of the school of, or we became the School of Education for Vanderbilt. His name was Willis Hawley, and I vividly remember my conversation in his office when he said, "Sharon, you know we're not going to be able to tenure you." And I said, "Yes, but there's several people you're not going to be able to tenure, but we're viable to your college. And so what are we going to do about this?" And that's when he formed the clinical practice faculty role. What has happened with that is that we now see that the majority of the people that serve in that role are women. And so women now are funneled to this. And I feel like that once we had Dean Benbow as our dean, and she's been our dean for 19 years, she realized that there was an inequity. And so I have worked with her for 19 years to make that position and that role much more equitable. Maternity leaves, sabbaticals, research funding, more maternity leave, all of those things to find a way to make that a more equitable role for the faculty and for people to be able, all we want to do is self-actualize. Mm-hmm. We want to be who we were meant to be. And so those opportunities ought to be open across all ranks, all abilities, and really letting people live out their authentic lives. And that's why we keep fighting for these things, because we want authenticity and we want people to make their best contributions. Mm-hmm. And so being able to give the foundation for that and a level playing field for that has been really the part of justice that I think needs to be promoted here.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen any other departments? I know you said that there's still more male professors and males receiving tenure on campus, but have you seen any other departments see any improvements in terms of having more tenured female professors? And
of course. I mean, the English department had a 100-year history of not tenuring a woman. Mm-hmm. And now we have tenured women there. So sure, there's milestone events.
Right.
We do have more women being recruited into tenure roles.
Right.
There's been an effort for that. We have more minorities being recruited into tenure roles. We had to be intentional. We had to make up time. And with intentionality, we can change things. Mm-hmm. And with understanding the barriers that have been there and reducing those barriers are so important. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I have seen change. Do I see it being level? Not yet. Do I see it being easy? Not yet. There are still barriers. There are still prejudices. There are still misconceptions and misperceptions. But I think, you know, Camilla Benbow was the first woman dean at Peabody.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we had a profession that was predominantly women. So I credit her with a lot about looking at inequities and really giving some leadership to that and being another woman who understands those barriers and those pitfalls and things that women have had to fight because she had to fight them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's and I think the more women get in leadership, I am so pleased we have Provost Wente.
Mm-hmm.
As a leader, we are seeing more women in leadership roles now in the university. But we still haven't had a woman chancellor.
Right.
We haven't had a woman vice chancellor over athletics. You know, those are kind of male-dominated places in our society and in our university. And so, you know, we've had male coaches coaching women, but we haven't really perpetuated the idea that gender is not the deciding factor. We should have equity and opportunity for all of those positions, and that there are really no positions that should be kind of forbidden for women at this university.
And what forces do you think would be necessary in creating more change and more equity amongst the faculty? Would it be more so from faculty or students or a combination, or just a complete destructuring of the institutions in place that keep men as the priority and the predominant faculty?
Sometime I want you to go to Kirkland Hall, if you haven't been. And I want you to look at who's hanging in pictures there.
Right.
We have a woman Board of Trust member who was the chair. Martha Ingram's picture is there. Cornelius Vanderbilt's wife's picture's there. We have very few, if any, people of color hanging on those walls that have been pivotal to this institution, even though we have had people of color pivotal to this institution. I've actually encouraged Roosevelt Noble to put part of his work on Lost in the Ivy to petition to have a segment of that in Kirkland Hall. Let's not just keep it in the Black Cultural Center.
Right.
And so when you ask me who needs to work on it, we all do.
Okay.
The community at the university has got to work on this. We have to do more education. We have to do more advocacy. We have to change the culture and the climate, and it's going to take everyone. It's going to take a willingness on those who hold certain prejudices to be open to change and to be open to understanding. It's going to take those of us who feel oppressed to speak out and to always speak up when we are in places that we can make a difference. We cannot lose our voice in these things. And we have to find the support and the advocacy, such as what the Women's Center offers us, and Casey Potter Center, and all of the other centers, the new one for justice that Frank Dobson is heading up. All of these are part of our community saying, you know, we still have work to do. And we have got to fight for these so that every person on this campus and all of our work speaks to justice.
Okay. Just trying to see if there's anything else. So have you noticed as a faculty any differences between male and female participation when it comes to in class or on campus as students?
Well, of course, I've taught here for 40-something years, and my classes are predominantly female.
Right.
And I will say that early on in my career, I felt that even though the classes were predominantly female then, that there was much more male airtime in the classroom because that had been pretty much encouraged in our educational system. I felt males took more risk. They'll raise their hand even though they don't know the answer necessarily, but they'll think about it a minute, and they weren't afraid to give a wrong answer. But females were a little different. They were much more intimidated, I think, by just the social structure and system. They had been used to having that in classrooms in their earlier training, pre-college. There were a lot of things that we did in classrooms. You know, there was a book by, is it Gilligan, I think? Carol Gilligan. And they spoke on our campus. She and her husband spoke on our campus about male voice and female voice and gender roles in our educational system and giving girls voice. And this was back in the early years here. And, you know, really having some research that really helped us to understand what we needed to do to bring this out and what the kind of training had been and the expectations had been. And so, you know, I had a really good colleague at another school. Her name was Clifford Lewis, and Clifford is now deceased. She probably would be over 100 years old now. But she applied to medical school. And she got accepted. She got a scholarship. She showed up. They thought Clifford was a male.
Wow.
She was the only female in the class, and they denied her admission based on her gender. She then went into exercise physiology and health work and things like that. But she was denied this, and this was back in the 50s. Wow. I now look at how many women are in medical school. I now look at the doors that are open here. But I also hear the stories of how women are treated across this university by their male peers, and especially in graduate school. And so, you know, we still have got to think about, are we giving enough voice? Are we advocating? Are we promoting women in the areas that we need to? Do males still get preference in certain situations? And I probably have not felt it as much as I did in the first 2 decades of my time here. The last 2 decades have been a little more transformative and a little more transparent, and there have been wonderful efforts by many people to open those doors. But I will say the glass ceiling is still real. It's still real.
Right. Do you feel, I mean, of course, there's a lot of changes occurred over the 40 years you've been here, but do you feel as if there's sufficient resources now for those people, whether it be women or other minorities who are experiencing discrimination or unease on campus, to kind of access and really not resolve, but assist and alleviate with those issues?
In my role as Associate Dean now at Peabody College, we do not have enough resources. We don't have capacity. We're working on it. I know the university is working on it, whether it's around mental health issues or supporting students in other ways and having ways to embrace inclusivity and affirm all students here on this campus. But I don't think that we have arrived. I think that there is still a great need for resources and resource capacity. And I hope that we are really continuing to be intentional, that we mean it, that this is not window dressing to say that we're doing things. It needs to not only be broad, but it needs to be deep, and it needs to be well-resourced. I think we're moving. We're crawling. We're crawling. We need to be running full steam ahead. And we need to really find viable ways to meet not only student need, but faculty need, staff need, and to be a culture and a climate that evolves into a human rights respectful environment for all people that reside here, whether they're working as a staff member, whether they're employed as a faculty member, whether it's a student, and it needs to be at all levels. The human need on this campus and the human rights of the people here needs to be embraced and respected, and the diversity needs to be really it needs to be who we are, that we embrace difference and we embrace unity in that difference.
Okay. Well, what is your favorite memory of your time at Vanderbilt, whether it be student or faculty?
Wow. I have a lot of favorite memories here. You know, I was given so many opportunities here. And so I would just have to bundle it into, I always tell people, if you look at my vita, you would think I could not hold a job at Vanderbilt University. I have gotten to be an associate dean, an assistant provost, a faculty head of house, an interim director of the State and Local Policy Center. I was co-founder of the Diane Center. I've been a full professor of the practice in my department. I've lived a good life on this campus. I have been blessed with so many opportunities. And so I would just bundle it all, that no matter the hurdles, I found ways to find support and to be a part of giving voice, and that after 40 years, I don't think my voice was shut down. Sometimes it was quieted. But over the years, those experiences have made me stronger. It has made me realize the community in which I do live, and it is a good community. We're like any other community. We have things to do, work to do. And that's what makes this a living, breathing, evolving environment. We are about the human condition in both our research, our teaching, and our service. And so if I had to say to you one thing, I respect this university for always working toward improving the human condition. And that's been the most meaningful thing to me, that we have gotten to do work to do that.
Very cool. I guess my final question would be, what would have kind of taken all these amazing experiences and made them better? What would have improved your experience at Vanderbilt as a faculty or as a student, or both?
You know, I think it's, I wish Wow. I wish we were there. That would have made a difference if we had accomplished the things we are still trying to accomplish. But I live in an era that I've seen progress. You will probably outlive me. And so you will see progress, and I know that you will be a person who fights for progress. My grandmother didn't, and my great-grandmother, who I knew both of them and all of them, they didn't get to vote. Mm-hmm. They were treated as property. And so when I think of the era that I got to live in and the lack of opportunity that they had and the roles that they had to play in the confines of our society, my grandmother had an 8th grade education. She did not get to go on. My mother did not get to finish college. Mm-hmm. The World War II, she and my dad married, and my mother actually put all the rest of us through and was determined that as a firstborn female child, that every opportunity was going to be given to me, even though we were a lower middle class family. Mm-hmm. But they knew the importance of education, and I will say that my heritage taught me that I could be anything I wanted to be. I lived in that environment. And so having supportive women in my family, supportive women as my teachers, supportive women as colleagues, supportive women as friends, I realize that we have made progress and that I can see it generationally. I wish I could come back and live in an era where all of this was resolved and then see who I could become. Mm-hmm. We all make the most, I hope, of where we are in society, in time, and I'm just glad that I can continue to see evolution of these issues.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.